So who's ready to make a ruckus? Hands up. Okay, everybody else can leave now. Because that's what we're here for, right? Reinvention cannot go with cat videos. Okay, so I have Swiss chocolate to give away, but you need to compete for it. And I want to talk a little bit about mastering change. And I want to start with, I love this slide, Aiden. Yeah, Aiden, my brother from another mother. We do not have a vision crisis. Like we always talk about all these things we can do in technology. We have an action crisis. So let's get to work. So I'm going to be pretty practical about these things. And in a context of, crazy economy, crazy global world, and AI. So I brought my digital twin that I set up in 5 minutes just to start this off with a little bit of tech.
Hey, I'm Alex's AI digital twin. I know a lot more about AI than him, but since he's talking about transformation, you're probably still in good hands with him. على الرغم من أن يتحدث عددا قليلا من اللغات إلا أن محتواه جيد جدا. Oh, and I might come back at the end to say goodbye. 祝你有一个愉快的闭幕主题演讲。
My daughter sent this video, actually on the weekend, because I made this on the weekend, to friends and said, hey, my dad learned 2 languages in 1 day. And when her best friend wrote back, that's insane. That's how naive people are. But this stuff is available to all of us, right? So this is a gimmick, this is to play, but it's at our fingertips. That's the crazy part. So thousands of people, millions of people can now innovate with this. Now, technology is never the problem, it's the opportunity. It's the lack of top-down vision, leadership, and governance, and the lack of enablement of bottom-up teams. So innovation is always bottom-up, but bottom-up alone doesn't work. It really needs top-down. So I'm just going to share a little bit of what we see in systematic transformation, and I'm going to put that in the context of innovation. We need to learn a new way of working. Learning is not the thing, so going to business school, learning new things, not going to be enough. We need to apply it immediately. And as leaders, we actually need to track, are we making progress as an organization, as teams, to get the results in innovation we want? Now, no company doesn't do innovation, but there are not a lot of results. Okay, the statistics show that 80% of companies put innovation at the top, and 3% are actually good at it. That's an insane ability gap. So I want to talk about these 4 things in the context of innovation. First one, we're going to look at the dual mindset. How do we manage and then reinvent at the same time? How do we apply the innovation process practically? How do we track progress? And how do we get results? Now, I'm a pretty practical person, so I'm going to talk about tools a little bit. I'm going to make it extremely practical. We had a lot of great stuff today. Now, to make the transition tomorrow to implementation, I want to talk about some of the most important things that I believe we need to get into organizations to get started. So the first thing I always do with senior leaders and teams is talk about the dual mindset. How do we manage and reinvent or innovate, create new value at the same time? So it's actually very simple. Every innovation, reinvention starts with an idea. Could be technology, could be market opportunity, could be an asset that you have, access to millions of customers, but no more value proposition that you can sell. And then you try to search for the right solution, value proposition, business model. Once you've found that, that's when you scale and manage that product, brand, or business unit. Okay? Straightforward. Now here's the problem, or the challenge, is that the left-hand side, searching, is very different from managing. By the way, ideas don't matter. They're free. They're everywhere. There's a lot of problems and things to solve. What's hard is turning ideas into value propositions that customers care about, embedded in business models that can scale. Okay? So we call this explore and exploit. Many different words for this, and it's been around as a topic for a while. But now we're seeing leaders starting to do this. And I can tell you, the senior leaders I've been able to talk to the last couple of weeks and months, this blows them away. Oh, I can now put words on this thing. Because the challenge is the KPIs we use here, the key performance indicators, to run a company, they do not apply to innovation. They're actually the death penalty of innovation. Who's seen this? Applying exploit to explore. And it's not that one is more important or better than the other. It's about doing both, okay? Steve Blank calls this over here paying the salaries, and over here paying the pension. We need both. Okay, now let's compete for Swiss chocolate. So grab your phones, because this is not just any chocolate from the supermarket. This is access to chocolate heaven. Okay, and this is your opportunity to get access to chocolate heaven with knowledge around explore, exploit. So I'm going to give you a term, and you're going to tell me, does it go into exploit, explore, or both? Is it about innovation? Is it about managing the existing, or does it relate to both? Okay, as always with technology, we have a connecting to the quiz problem. Okay. I did compromise on something which now is showing up as a problem. But since we take risks when we reinvent, here you go. It's a live demo of failing. Okay, well, I'm going to have to eat the Swiss chocolate on my own. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, that's a pity. No? Okay. Well, let's get back to work. Sorry for that. But that'll be, yeah. Work without reward. I'm not sure if that's really going to work without Swiss chocolate. Okay, but so, what we want to understand is how these two worlds are different. So, on this side, we have less uncertainty than on this side, which means we can manage the more or less predictable. We know the customers, we know the value proposition, we know the supply chain. Now, sometimes geopolitics and tariffs, don't really work out the way we want, or pandemics, so there's never zero uncertainty. Now, on this side, we need to admit that we do not know what's going to work. And while that sounds trivial, actually very few companies do that. Who of you has ever seen a PowerPoint presentation of a new idea with a slide, that shows a curve going upwards for the revenues for an idea that you don't know it's going to work, but the person who's presenting is very charismatic and is very good at presenting that curve going up? Who's ever seen that? Okay? Whoever wanted to invest all of their money in that idea and then has seen it fail? So in companies in particular, in the startup world, we don't do that as much. We actually don't admit that we do not know if it's going to work. In many companies, it's not a good career plan to go to the CEO and say, I have a great idea, I have no clue if it's going to work, but give me $1 million. What's going to happen to most people? You're going to be put in the insanity corner, okay? Now, those companies who get it, they understand that these two worlds are different. So on the right-hand side, we analyze, we make plans, business plans, we make beautiful spreadsheets, and then we invest big, lighthouse projects, because we know it's going to work. On this side, we make small bets and only invest further. We only double down if we see evidence that it's going to work. Let me show you how to do that. And that means for us, as leaders, as innovators, we need to ask different questions. On the right-hand side, typical kind of management questions. Are we on time? Are we on budget? Good project management. And if we're not, well, your career should be at risk. On the left-hand side, as a CEO, maybe I talk to my supply chain team over here, and then 5 minutes later, I speak to a team working on new products and services. Well, guess what? I'm going to ask different questions. What did we learn? Do we have evidence that it makes sense to go on, to invest further? Should we change, pivot, or should we kill the idea? Who of you is in a company where you're working on an idea, not you, of course, but somebody else in the company, working on an idea you know is not going to work or very unlikely going to work, and you're still continuing to put money and resources on it? Who has that in their company? Okay, so like 1/3 is honest in the room. Everybody has that. Now, that's not because people are not smart. It's because we have processes where we don't say, when do we continue to invest, when do we kill? And there's a loss of face when you kill a project or you admit it didn't work, right? So we need to work in a different way. So on the top, it's analysis versus experimentation. Just keeping it simple. On the right, it's lighthouse project investments versus incremental investments. Follow-up investments on the ideas that work. And at the bottom, it's implementation versus killing 9 out of 10 ideas. And if you can't do that, teams are condemned to succeed. Because if they can't fail, there are 2 options. What are the 2 options a team has? To hide failure, and we were talking about this with Rita yesterday at dinner. If you're the CEO, you'll actually just make the project look good until you're not CEO anymore, because then it's the next person's problem. That's a strategy, and you're laughing. It's actually sadly true. Who's seen that? Come on, hands up. Not maybe the CEO, but the leader. Okay, yeah, good. And then the other piece is, well, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to play it safe because I don't want to risk my career. Make sense? So people don't take risks, so you're always going to stick to incremental innovation. I had tons of CEOs who asked me, Alex, I'm not getting this breakthrough innovation. Then I always ask, well, how many projects do you kill to get a winner? I say, what do you mean? I say, well, your teams are condemned to succeed. So we start with explore and exploit with the basics so they know how to invest. Now, let's look at process. So there are 2 categories of tasks in innovation and reinvention. Business design, thinking about business models and value propositions, and experimenting to reduce the risk of building something stupid. Okay? We design as if we were right, but we immediately go and experiment. And we heard this from Patagonia today, right? This experimentation mindset. If we do not have that, we're not going to succeed. Now, who of you has ever seen teams in corporations, not in your company, of course, not in your team, but other teams that overthink things where you don't yet have the data to know if it's going to work or not? Analysis paralysis, right? So one of the questions I had to win chocolate was, does analyzing an idea reduce the risk of building something nobody wants? Not in innovation, right? Great, I'm happy to see some of you would have won Swiss chocolate. Analyzing is important, but it's not going to reduce risk. So what do? You go to experiment, you learn, and you go back to redesign if you need to, or pivot, or kill the idea, okay? That's a big one. Kill the idea if it doesn't work. And we've seen that throughout the day, this experimentation mindset. So this is what you call a sprint. We call this a program where you systematically follow steps. You take an idea, sometimes you need ideation, sometimes it's a pre-existing idea, sometimes it's a technology, it's an opportunity. Then you quickly do the red part. You map out your idea with a business model canvas, value proposition canvas, or tool of your choice. But then you immediately, I'd say maximum 1 hour, maybe a morning you spend on designing your idea, afternoon you're out and talking to customers as fast as you can. Now, it's not linear. Sometimes you go back. Sometimes you learn. Maybe you do this together with your R&D team. Who of you has ever thought, well, if my technology people and my R&D people had a little bit more of a business mindset and we went out together in the field, we could iterate much faster. Who's ever seen opportunities like that? Multidisciplinary teams, R&D researchers together with business people going out and experimenting. Who's seen that? That would be a good idea. Hasn't seen it maybe. That is a huge opportunity to use technology. Technology is just a means to an end to create more value for customers and for our businesses. Now, how does this process work? You do this really fast, maybe 2 months, 3 months, and then you present, indeed, a PowerPoint to the people who have the money, who are going to invest, but it's an evidence-based presentation. So I remember one team or one group of teams, we had 10 teams, and they were super afraid to present to the CEO, who's a really nice person. But there was this culture in the company that we needed to make the fantasy look real as if we were implementing. Because the better the prototype, the less you think it's a prototype, which is actually a bad thing. So I told the CEO, I called him and said, you need to tell your teams you want to see evidence. You don't care about the color of their prototype. So we need to encourage people to present something else, not the idea, the evidence that supports the idea. Do you see the difference? So what we often need to do is educate leaders top down what it means to judge evidence, not ideas. And teams, encourage them to present evidence that support an idea. Or, even bolder, teams that say there is no evidence, we need to kill this project. And the best companies have that, right? So it's not a failure to actually show it's not going to work. So I'll give you a silly example, very quick, from Bosch. So their kind of objective was, what they needed to do was to find a business model, so about business model innovation, for the Internet of Things applied to cold chains in agriculture. Okay, that was the kind of thing they needed to do. The team went through the first sprint, and then a second sprint, and that turned into a business model. What you'll also see later is 70% of the other teams, actually more than 70%, 90% of the teams didn't make it to that stage, and that's okay. So let's go through this. It's actually a little bit like getting fit. So if you want to run a marathon, if you want to gain muscle, if you want to lose weight, and you've never done that before, well, what do? You need to pick a program, go through the program with or without a coach to achieve your goals. It's the same in innovation or any other transformation or reinvention. Make the goal explicit, and then pick the program to achieve that goal. In our case, it's these innovation sprints. And then you do one exercise after the other, step for step. You learn how the exercise works, and then you apply it. So in their case, they interviewed people, they built an MVP, and they tested the pricing model. And they used tools in the process, looking at jobs, pains, and gains with customers, then only going to the value proposition, then only going to test the pricing. The order doesn't always need to be as linear, but this is how they set it up, okay? That's a program where you go through. It's like fitness. And then, of course, like in sports and fitness, just doing the tasks or just learning how the exercise works, even worse, right? Not enough. We need to track progress. Are we doing the exercises? But if you're really serious to getting to your goal, it's not enough to track activity. It's actually important to track if you're making progress. So in innovation, you're tracking if you're creating more evidence that can support the idea. Because unlike in execution projects, activity doesn't mean progress. It could mean progress towards killing, but you see what I mean? So it's not a linear process. You might actually learn that you need to pivot, which is regression, not progression, okay? Super important. And then the last one, well, just like in fitness, you could be coached by people, internal people, external people. You can design these programs in a self-service way, or you can use AI. Typically, we build AI into this stuff so that it generates some of the exercises quickly, because why use software and tools if they don't make your life easier, okay? So that's what Bosch did. They channeled teams through this systematic process to get there. Now, let's look at what I mean with tracking progress. Sorry, I'm sticking to this thing because my iPad doesn't work the way I thought. So we need to track progress because, love quoting Steve Blank, the inventor of the whole kind of lean startup process and methodology, because he speaks in quotable, in tweetable, Xable, or LinkedInable lines. Okay, so let me give you an example of how not to do it. Who of you has ever heard of Forward Health? Not many, because they didn't have a lot of customers. So their idea was, we're going to build clinics where you don't have doctors and you don't have nurses, but you have technology. Unfortunately, they had no patience either, so they pivoted towards care pods. What if we put these care pods into shopping centers? That's got to work. And they got $100 million to pivot. Okay? Unfortunately, that didn't work either. How much cash do you think they burned? I already gave you a bit of an indicator, the pivot, $100 million. So it's Silicon Valley, right? So like, just a little bit of pocket change here. $650 million to basically build something that nobody wants, but they're not alone. The corporate world is probably just as good as this. So I remember making a presentation in Sweden many years ago. I was talking about this kind of the beginning of evidence-based investment, and I put this money pile on the slide, and Apple has this wonderful burning thing, you know, where you can flame the stuff. So I burnt this pile of money, and I said, companies burn too much cash like that. And there's this guy from Ericsson who stands up, and you know, without even like, he just stands up and said, Alex, that's not true. At the end of my talk. It was the beginning of my career, and I thought, gee, now I just ruined my whole talk. Now I'm no credibility anymore. And he says, Ericsson, that pile of cash, much bigger. Like, okay. And it's true that we invest in lighthouse projects, and sometimes even worse, into the CEO's baby, the pet project. What's the problem with the CEO's baby? Nobody will tell the CEO your baby's ugly. So if you work on evidence-based investments and you help leaders make evidence-based investments, you can actually manage that challenge pretty well. And I have so far never seen a CEO, and I just have a small window on the world. I kind of get those who already want to do innovation. I've never seen a CEO saying, that makes no sense, I have this idea. And there are regions in the world where it's even harder because CEOs believe they got the vision from God, right? So, let me show you how Bosch kind of did this, and these were the early days, so I don't think this was perfect, but it was pretty good, how they kind of look at making investments, evidence-based investment, track progress. So, over 3 years, they had 240 teams starting, 3 months, 120,000 euro, but it was mainly time. Okay, so these were their salaries, which they cost money, right? But no out-of-the-pocket cash. These were 100% teams. I prefer actually 20-40% teams for the first round. I'll tell you why. All they had to do is gather evidence for the existence of jobs, pains, and gains of customers. Do customers have the challenge that we believe they have so that we can actually build a solution? So they didn't go ahead and build something. Too many teams who say, yeah, we do lean startup, we experiment. They build shit way too early. Why? Because they read the lean startup and is run by engineers. I had to make a bad Swiss joke about engineers. Or R&D people who look at the feasibility of the science first. So we should flip it and look at jobs, pains, and gains, customers first. Now that sounds so trivial, but how many of you are in companies where we do not shape an idea quickly and then go right out to talk to customers first before we think feasibility, right? That's still very rare. Then, of course, they retire almost 70% of ideas, and they only give follow-up investments to the teams who could show evidence, customer evidence. Those teams then get money to build minimal viable products. Now it makes sense to build something, but it's not the thing you want to start with. So I hear a lot of people telling me, oh, we do MVP, Alex. Oh yeah, hey, how much do you spend on your MVP? $1 million. That's not the kind of MVP you want first without customer evidence. So people build stuff way too early. Even with AI, you can go super fast. You might want to talk to customers first, right? Maybe, synthetic customers. That's also a thing these days. Okay, so you look at the value proposition, and then what they did is again retire 74% of the teams who did not have evidence that their solution created value. And that's okay. So failure was actually the biggest thing they had to manage, is to say, it's okay, we're not going to waste stuff on things that people don't want. And then the last phase was kind of the scaling with the business model. So I think this was the early days. It was pretty simple, but it was pretty good. It was pretty good. Okay? Now we're much more sophisticated. So what was good in innovation 5, 10 years ago is not as good today, but given I had about 20 minutes, I couldn't go into the details of how you actually do, calculations of evidence to calculate the risk of each idea. Now let's finish up with the last one, getting results. And I like this example of Ping-An because they were a financial conglomerate, more traditional one, in banking and insurance. And their founder, Peter Ma, said, if we do not transform and become a technology company, if we don't reinvent ourselves, we're going to get killed by Tencent, Alibaba, etc. So it's not a technology-first company who started like that, because even they have to transform, but then people can brush it off. No, this was like banking and insurance. So they did this whole experimentation. They had a portfolio just like Bosch, but I'm only going to focus on the results, because I want to bring up this idea of different types of innovation and that you want a portfolio of all three. So the first type of innovation is really about increasing efficiency. And there's nothing wrong with that. You need to manage the core and get better at the core. So here they created something. We could have an ethical debate about, this. You can apply for loans with them, but you need to know that AI is going to detect micromimicry if you're lying or not. And they will give you loans based on the AI prediction if you're lying or not. Well, here's what happened. Loan default went down, loan applications went up. So it worked from a business perspective. Ethics, different conversation, right? So that was to improve the existing. Then if we look at really new value propositions, we could debate, this is already going towards new business models. They created a platform called Ping-An Good Doctor, and within that, they had a chatbot called Ask Bob, way before ChatGPT. And today they serve 1.2 million doctors. Now we're talking about reinvention here today, right? Let me just remind you, this was a banking and insurance conglomerate that reinvented themselves and created the biggest health platform of the planet, serving 1.2 million doctors and 400 million patients. The best that the Swiss banking industry could come up with was UBS acquiring Credit Suisse because they screwed up. It's a very painful Swiss joke. You're not laughing, as in nobody's laughing in Switzerland either. And in the Middle East, even less, because they gave us the money to fail. So, disruptive business models is also what they did, because Peter Ma hired a lady called Jessica Tan and said, you need to experiment boldly, and she did. They came up with OneConnect, a banking platform that would use all of their AI capabilities, not just to serve their bank, but to serve all other banks, their competitors. So they were self-disrupting. That takes a lot of courage from leadership to say, we're going to grow through offering our core services to other banks. But they said, our bank is so small, we're better off becoming an infrastructure company in banking. Okay? Very powerful. They grew from the top 500 companies to the top 50 for the last decade, sometimes making it up to the top 20. And that was really driven by Jessica Tan, former co-CEO of Ping-An, today CEO of Sun Life in Canada. And we heard another great example this morning from Rita. Toss, right. Looking at you like, there you go. So we do need to work differently to do these things, so just bring it back to process. Now, I was going to show you that what you can even do, because if I can do it, you can do it. I created an avatar that just did a video. But I have an interactive avatar that I also did on the weekend, but I have a sense that this is not going to work. Oh, look, we can actually do the game. Let's actually play the game. Let's play the game instead of listening to Avatar Alex. If it works. Well, it doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work, so that was like a teaser. Let's see if this guy works. So my kids made fun of me and said, Dad, now you can talk to yourself all the time. And when we were testing this, you know what happened? It was even worse than me talking to my digital twin. The digital twin was hearing the loudspeaker, so the digital twin was talking to itself. And I was excluded from my own digital twins. Like, it was insanity. It was like I felt really outside of the community. Okay, that didn't work. That's fine. So I think we had a bit of a laugh about my technology. I want to do a last exercise. So I want you to close your eyes. Very uncomfortable for a Swiss to ask anybody to close their eyes, but close your eyes. And what I want you to do is imagine yourself drawing something. Okay? I'm going to tell you what you're going to draw. But imagine yourself, picture a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil or a Sharpie, whatever you prefer to draw. And don't say, I don't draw, okay? Just imagine yourself drawing. I'm going to give you, now, 5 seconds. In 5 seconds, I want you to draw a small house, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Stop, don't open your eyes. Now I want you to decorate the house and the surroundings in another 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Open your eyes and tell me if this is what you drew, maybe with a tree beside it. Hands up if that's the case. Okay, good luck with reinvention. Such a non-creative crowd. Who drew something completely different?
Thanks, but let's focus on you. What's going on in your business right now? Any challenges or goals you want to tackle together?
Okay, shut up over there. Like, what are you doing now? You're way too late. You're way too late. Okay, that was not planned. Anyways, so I suggest design your own programs. We're going to launch a whole series of programs. I really believe in this kind of structured approach of learning, applying, tracking progress, and getting those results. So design your programs. We're designing a couple beyond innovation. Transformation is a process. Yes, you need creativity to reinvent yourself, but there's a lot of process there, bottom-up processes and top-down governance. And if you do that, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to reinvent. And yeah, test your AI a bit more. Mine didn't really. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.